Welcome, everybody, to the Artisan Church All-Inclusive Podcast. My name is Josephus.
And I'm Reed Conley, pastor of Artisan Church.
In today's episode, we will be talking about odd jobs that we've had, or just jobs in general.
I think just jobs is such an interesting conversation. I mean, we have this habit. I think when we meet people, like, what do you do? What's your thing? And but talking about what people used to do is way more interesting to me.
Oh yeah,
because it's part of that journey. So,
how many paths did you take to get to the one that you're on?
Yeah.
So, Rich, why don't you go ahead and kick us off?
And I'm Rich Green, someone who's not supposed to be part of this conversation.
Why aren't you supposed to be?
Rich, I can't wait to hear about your jobs. I'm actually going to start us off, so give you just a second to think about it.
You're a vital part of our conversation.
I brought an artifact from an old job of mine. This is a what do you call this? A checkbook for a server at a restaurant?
Yeah, a bill. What is it?
I forget the name of it. Sponsored by American Express. This is from J. Alexander's restaurant where I worked.
They had a nice steak there.
Yeah. All the food was so good at J. Alexander's, but the service
was that in Tampa?
Was amazing. Yes.
Okay. Granny lived in St. Pete, so
maybe I ran into her at some point.
Maybe
when she came to the restaurant. But so I was a server for a while. I was not a good server. I think it takes probably a year and also really needing to be a good server to become one, because it's not a natural thing. I bumped into people and probably left a lot of sales on the floor there. But
why don't you guys try the Jesus fries? It goes great with it. No, I'm just picking.
I don't know. I mean, it was a different time. But it was really a good experience. I recommend that everybody work in service industry at some point, because it is really important. Well, those workers are really important.
I think it'd be good for people to do it too. So when you're sitting at a restaurant, you're really frustrated, and it's a packed restaurant, and you're like, man, my waiter's taking forever to come tend to me. You get to see what it really is that they're going through, and you gain a greater appreciation for what it is they actually do.
Mm-hmm.
I've noticed. Have you ever noticed that in a job you've done where you're like, it seems easy from the outside, or you just don't know what all it entails, so you kind of have a prejudgment, then you actually have done the job and you're like, wait a minute, this is a lot.
I think that's most jobs, right?
Right.
Like taking pictures, that's pretty easy. You just push one button. What's the big deal? Why does it take so long? What's all the setup, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Or what does a pastor do all week? It's ridiculous. You only work one day a week?
Right. I think that one was actually very interesting to me. Like, I've never been a pastor, but like I've seen like pastors that are like,
you're definitely seeing a little bit behind the curtain
right,
at this point.
Yeah. And it's just like the calls in the middle of the night, or having to be next to people's bedsides and stuff. This was my other pastor. It was,
right.
Not, but I'm sure you would do the same.
I'm ready.
Right. But yeah, it's crazy how much there is hidden behind the curtain of any job.
Absolutely. So how about, this was not a strange job that I shared about, but I did share some in a sermon recently. So, but you tell me what some of your jobs have been that.
So
maybe
one of the oddest ones I had that is like interesting to explain to people is I was a clerk, so to speak, at a land center. Do you know what a land center is?
A land center?
LAN, L-A-N.
Oh, LAN. Yeah. Okay, yeah, local area network.
Yeah.
Okay.
Basically a big computer center where you find them a lot in military towns. It's where you can go and you can play games, you can get on the internet, you can send emails.
Yeah.
Like, if you don't have like a base of operations, or if you're like stationed on a ship and you need to have access to computers, that's where you would go. Mm-hmm. And they usually have like a bar, and then a food bar. They also they did sell alcoholic drinks there from time to time, depending on which one you went to. But it was a pretty interesting experience, like selling time to play on the computer or be on the computer.
Right.
Like, just to see how many people actually like did that. And
This business model is quickly dying off, if not extinct at
Oh,
this
yeah,
point,
it's-
because
it's- yeah.
that was a time when not everybody had fast internet and you wanted to get together
Exactly.
and play games with your friends sometimes. So you'd have like, were you open late?
Oh yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes, yes. Some we actually had 24-hour LAN parties every like other weekend and stuff like that. So I mean, we had a lot of kids come in there as well because again, internet wasn't. This is the start of the internet age.
Yeah.
But like it was cool. It was definitely an odd job, though, because most times your first job is what, McDonald's, or
Yeah.
you're used to hearing that, and they're like, what did you do for your first job? I worked at a land center. What on earth is that?
Probably met a little bit of everybody at the
Oh, yeah.
Land Center.
Yeah, it
All
was-
ages, demographics. Yeah, that would be interesting. Lots of long hours. How about you, Rich? What kind of jobs have you worked that what might surprise us?
Well, the summer before I attended college, I worked at an industrial laundromat. I'm from Smithfield, Virginia, where the hams are made.
Shout out Smithfield.
Oh, Smithfield.
Or cured, rather.
They
They're
actually
not made
do have
there.
a gold sign like leading into the town too. The
Yeah,
Smithfield
exactly,
sign. I love
exactly.
that. Yeah.
So there was one industrial laundromat that was owned by a friend of our family, and he agreed to give me a job for the summer. And my job was we would pick up the smocks that the workers would wear on the kill floors in the morning and wash them and fold them and then deliver them in the evening. And so we had 3 piles. We had clean, which meant they weren't really clean. They were dirty, but there was nothing too significantly gross. We had dirt, and then we had blood. And so,
Oh my gosh.
let me tell you, the disgust level was way off the chart for that job.
What do you wear to work in a job like that?
I don't really remember. I've tried to block the memory out of my head because it was kind of traumatic. But I mean, pulling parts is parts, but pulling them out of a smock pocket.
They had pockets.
Oh yes.
Oh.
So they were leaving parts in the.
Or parts would fall. In the process of
Gotcha.
chopping or slicing or whatever, they were deboweling, disemboweling, I think is the proper term.
Disembowel. Yeah.
Dirty
So,
pile.
Dirt pile was just anything, if they brushed up against anything and got dirt all over themselves, grease or anything like that. And clean was just not to the level of grease or
Right.
blood.
A
So,
simple washing might do. Okay.
So did you guys
Wow.
ever get the blood pile like back to white?
Yes,
Or-
they had some really caustic chemicals that they would use to wash these things in. I mean, just kind of like rip your face off, melt your skin kind of chemicals. And at the end of the day, I would say 99% of those smocks came out pristine white every single time. Yeah, it was crazy. Then we'd deliver them in the afternoon and start the whole thing. In the middle of the day, I would also fold in a room that didn't have any windows whatsoever. So it was exciting. I was left with my own thoughts. My own thoughts lent to, I don't want to ever do this again.
Sounds like some kind of
It was a
dystopian-
character building exercise for me.
Yeah. Wow. That is something you don't hear about every day.
You asked odd. I have odd.
Yeah. Well, I think there's probably a long list of jobs behind just about everybody that has wanted to get into the workforce in any way, and maybe that's not true universally, but I just find it so interesting to hear about jobs, and I would like to talk a little bit more about what kind of fulfillment we get from jobs, what kind of meaning or purpose, or what brings us to a job other than money, right? Like I don't think you were looking necessarily for deep fulfillment in the spray of animal parts, but what kind of a fulfillment are we looking for in jobs, and is it possible to find it in simply a job? Maybe we're thinking careers now too, but what do you think? Is it possible to find your fulfillment in what you do for a living?
I've got a lot of experience with this. personally, because the DC crowd, the people that work in government, I was in the military for 20 years, but I did tours in the DC area, and I've known plenty of both military and civilians, and I can say pretty equivocally true that most people that choose to work in government for a living, for a career, their entire identity is wrapped up in that career. It is all encompassing, and they tend to lose track of who they are or the real things. I'm being judgmental, but what I would judge as the real things in life: family, faith, spirituality, fellowship, the things that make us love one another and really live for the day. You tend to lose your soul in those kinds of jobs because your identity is wrapped up in a job that, quite frankly, the moment that you walk out the door, they forget exactly who you were. They'll never remember you again.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, it's tragic.
And those are difficult jobs to get, I would imagine, too. So if you're not bought in, trying to get that job from day one, someone else is there to probably step into your shoes too.
Sure, there's a lot of competition for it, and there's a lot of there's a lot of false prestige that's tied into it. With the importance of the job and who you work for and what kind of access you have to high levels of the government and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
I think I don't think you can, because who you are is based on who you are, just like naturally. Your job is just a title, so it doesn't make or it's like it defines like something about you, but can it be true deep fulfillment for a living? Like can it be true deep fulfillment? Not really, because like Rich was saying, you lose what the basis of what you're trying to leave behind. You might be, there's people who run, or not run, but there's people who do sports like that. And will they be remembered in a history book, or will they be remembered in like a stat line? Possibly.
Maybe.
Like, one of the greatest of all time. But will there be family there to remember you? Will there be, and that just, I guess, comes down to, really, it depends on whether or not you feel like your life is based in a family orientation. Because if you believe in family, then your job can't be the fulfillment. You know what I mean?
So it comes down to kind of like your values.
Yeah, your values.
What do you value? Is the job just a means to have provide for my family because my family is the most important thing, or is the job my identity? And so, like Rich's example is like a really extreme one,
right?
Where someone's willing to even sacrifice maybe their humanity to have this career where they're important. Maybe they have some power. Maybe they have some sway, and they feel like maybe they have some means to change the world, for lack of a better phrase. But the other side of the coin, maybe you have a job that you pour your life into. I'm just trying to think of like a devil's advocate type of example, where you find a job that you have to work really hard. You have to put a lot of time in. Maybe you're a fisherman,
right?
And there's no days off, or they're few and far between, but you have to work really hard. And through that, maybe you learn some life lessons. Maybe you gain some wisdom. Maybe you make some friends along the way. And I wonder if maybe a job like that might have some kind of deep level fulfillment for who I am in the world that I wouldn't have in another job. Or I'm just trying to think of an example where you might work really hard and dedicate yourself to something fully and still have some of your life left over.
I think it's just how you word the question. If you're saying, I think if you wake up and they have that saying, if you do what you love, you'll never work a day. I think you can find, I think you can find fulfillment in your job simply because it's, you selected this thing. So this is obviously like a challenge for you, or, people who play professional sports, people who are professional politicians. Like, they chose this path knowing that there's a sacrifice and there's a dedication to your craft that you have to have. If that is your drive, then that's your fulfillment. That is, making it to that next rank, making it to the next office, making it to the championship, world championship, and winning it. Like, yeah, you're gonna find fulfillment in that. But it comes down to, can that simply be something that fulfills your entire life? For me, knowing how important family for me is, I know without photography I can still have fulfillment in my life, is, with my family. That would fulfill, knowing that I left something behind for them in any aspect, whether it's doing photography or just going back to accounting. I might. Does that make sense?
A little bit. I mean, I hear what you're saying about the athlete is trying to achieve, and if they achieve, then they'll find some fulfillment.
Right.
That's what I heard you say.
Right.
Is that
Correct.
right?
Yeah, roughly.
And if you work in photography and you have something to leave behind for your family, then you will feel like your life is fulfilled.
Well, no, the photography side is like, okay, this is a challenge for me. Like, this is like this making people smile, or bringing an unexpected result to somebody that, they're like, oh, I'm not photogenic. For me, I think sometimes just like those people are more fun, because working with them and then producing a product that they're like, wow, I wasn't expecting it to be like this. That is fulfilling, because, you have this person who doesn't think highly of themselves in the moment, or they don't think that they can do something, and then through working through it together, you kind of come up with something that they're like, pleased with. It's a challenge, like there's some people who are just natural in front of a camera, and as fun as it is to work with those people, I think in life, the things that at least I find interesting, or I want to keep going after, is that challenge. I don't want to do something that's super simple. So the fulfillment for me in photography would be, working through those challenges, or getting into an industry that is really hard to,
Yeah. It sounds like it's a pairing of the fulfillment, as you're describing it, can be where I am solving a puzzle, there's a challenge for me, and I'm helping someone else. I'm bettering someone else through this, maybe, or providing a service that someone appreciates at the lowest level. And then when those two things kind of come together, and you make some money, maybe,
right,
and you're providing, you're able to survive on it, then you have this kind of a job that makes sense, and maybe you're saying it is fulfilling. Yeah.
Well, I think the word fulfillment is tricky, because it's like it becomes a matter of, are you being selfish or not? Because like, fulfilling myself through my job necessarily isn't always going to be a good thing. Like, if I'm sitting there chasing, like, say I'm making good money with the photography, I'm doing the challenging jobs, and it's enough to support my family. I think I faced this when I was a nuclear contractor and my wife got pregnant, and I'm away 8 months of the year with a newborn. Like, it's fulfilling to make the amount of money that I was making in that job. It's fulfilling to have the challenge of doing, like, going to different sites and dealing with different rules and regulations and overcoming them, and working with different people every single time you go. It's, for somebody who likes challenges, that's very fulfilling, but I'm going to sacrifice my family's fulfillment of what they need from me. And at that point, can my job serve as that fulfillment in my life that is like important to me? No, because I'm hurting the very people that are depending on me, even though I'm providing for them everything that they need monetarily.
Right.
So that's why I feel like this question is hard, because can you find it if you're selfish? Yes, I guess. If you want to, if we come from a selfish standpoint where only you matter, and I think that's, I guess, what Rich was kind of talking about with politicians, you lose sight of what truly matters. You miss every baseball game. You miss every recital.
Now that wasn't my comment wasn't about politicians. It was about government workers in general.
Okay, I'm sorry. I wasn't
I
trying to.
just want to
yeah.
clarify because it does make a difference. And the divorce rate amongst those people is pretty high
Gotcha.
because they make that choice that this is going to come first, and so many of them lose the work-life balance because of it.
Okay. So, but yeah, like okay, I got what you're saying.
Yeah. So, yeah, the fulfillment is kind of a very broad subject. So using that word opens up a lot of ideas because we're all going to be fulfilled in different ways, either by achieving or by creating or by helping. I think another interesting part of looking at jobs would be looking at how it shapes our identity and what a job shapes and makes us into, but also how we define ourselves by what we do. And kind of like a minor example, this would be, we were talking about this yesterday, what you drive, the car you drive can sometimes become a little bit of your identity. Like I had a Jeep once, and when I pulled up in a Jeep and I saw somebody else with a Jeep, we always waved at each other. It's just like
sort of like the motorcycles where they do they do the peace sign.
Yeah, do the peace sign. Yeah, so it's this unwritten rule that you're a Jeep driver, and you see, I've seen in a parade. There's a parade with Jeeps in it. Gosh, there was Jeeps going all the way down the miles of Jeeps. Anyway, that's just one example of how what we do, like, and not just the things that we own, but the job that we own can become a piece of our identity. So I wonder if we could talk about maybe some of the ways that is a positive thing and ways that could be a negative thing.
I think as photographers, me and Rich are photographers. There's this like nerdy, like, when you see another photographer or when you like get around other photographers, there's like this little like nerd fest that happens where you're like looking at each other's equipment, and you're kind of like picking out like, oh, why'd you go Canon, or why'd you go Nikon, why'd you go Sony? And you start off having that little rivalry,
right?
But then you kind of,
because you're gonna be a Canon guy, right? Or a Sony guy or whatever.
And then you break through that little wall of, just jarring one another or jabbing one another. And then all of a sudden it just comes down to like, no, really, I do have an appreciation for what your camera system is. And it's really interesting, the technology they have in it. And then it just, you just start nerding out on it and showing each other, your work and whatnot. And it's just like the passion that comes out because it is very creative to make photographs and, just see different techniques people have done, or you're like, how'd you do that? So I think for photographers at least, it sparks a creativeness in you that makes you want to go out and do better. When I meet a new photographer and they show me their portfolio for the first time or their body of work, and it might not be something I've done, or it might be something that's in the wheelhouse, I'm just like re-inspired to go out and not necessarily mimic that style, but just see if I can reverse engineer it and see if there's anything in there that I can add to my style that makes sense, to kind of freshen it up.
So I'm hearing you say like the inspiration piece of being in that group of creators is a driving thing that keeps you going forward, and so that's part of who you are when you carry around a camera. So you are living into that inspiration on a regular basis. But
the negative comes in where it's your, like, so say you have your niche, or say you're doing really well in your lane, and that drive to constantly innovate, or that drive to do something, you can get lost in the, like, I call it getting lost in the sauce. Like, you can, like, oh, I need to go get a new piece of equipment now because, like, you start to overanalyze what's working or not working in your own because you see something that someone else has, or it can quickly spiral. That inspiration can quickly spiral into feeling like you need to do something else when what you're doing works.
I think another aspect of letting our job or our career become our identity is that we build up a set of expectations based around that identity. So again, this is, having spent the majority of my adult life in the military realized that this is a problem for people who are exiting the military for whatever reason, whether they're retiring after a career, or maybe they've done a couple of tours and they decided they're going to go do something else with the rest of their life. And they actually set up these programs called transition assistance programs. And it allows you to sort of get the idea of where that military identity needs to be dropped off and a civilian identity needs to be adopted, because it's really, really hard for a lot of military people, myself included. I'm gonna self-admit here, to transition away from, my expectations in the military were different because I was an officer. If I wanted something done or I needed something done, I would ask for it to be done, and I could expect that the people that I asked to do it were going to do it to the best of their ability. And I wouldn't, if they're properly trained, I shouldn't have to follow up behind them, or, there's a certain level of competence. And so when that doesn't happen on the civilian side of life, and most of us don't live to those kinds of rigid standards, my expectations aren't met and I get very frustrated. And what I needed to do was sort of learn to decouple my identity as an officer in the military away from my identity as Rich Green, just the person, just somebody who needs to get by in life and let people and give other people encouragement. So.
I think that same thought process could be translated to the photography lane as well, where you have a set of expectations for yourself as a photographer. You want to be successful as a photographer, and that could be any job, right? Where you want to gradually get better. You want to get paid more. You want to be seen as someone, and that outside perspective comes in too. Like, what do my peers think of me in my job? And so all of that can leak into, well, I need to spend more time on it. I need to pour more of my energy into it, or I need to get more gear, And so then it's like you're climbing this ladder.
Do I have value in this? Am I valuable to this community, or,
I don't know if you notice this in photography communities, but one thing that I've actually been having to kind of face in my own self is my idea of what I want to do versus my idea of what I'm supposed to do. Because, like, I don't think doing kids photos at rec centers is the most fun thing, but it's something that I'm good at. It's something that I get paid pretty well to do on, so it's like, why are you fighting the current? If this is the lane you should be in, and I think a lot of photographers, if we sat down with them, could attest to, like, I wanted to do this, but what I was basically,
what pays the bills is this.
Yeah, what most people want from me is this.
Right.
And
or it's just the opportunity that you have in this particular season of your career. And
that's hard when you're doing a creative job, to be told that, hey, yeah, I know you think you're good at this, but hey, this is actually what we want to see from you.
Come do this way less creative way of doing your job, right?
But not to switch gears from photography, I guarantee there has to be some difficulties being a pastor, especially having 4 kids. Right? Is it 4?
I
lose count. No, I'm just kidding.
Me too.
No. I feel like that would be a hard job, being constantly on call, like, and not necessarily, like, everybody knows Sundays, but, like, throughout the whole week, just having something to do, or having, like, it has to be really taxing when you have, that type of situation.
Well, I think my role is even a little bit different from most typical pastors, or the traditional pastor job, in that is we're building a community from scratch. I get to wear lots of different hats. So I get to be the tech team, I get to be the music team, I get to be the preaching team and the communications team and everything. So I think sometimes in my world, my identity can get wrapped up in the success of all those different areas that all require some attention and some time. And so it could be easy for someone in my position to find those things seeping into all areas of my life, because I'm not on the clock. There's things that need to get done, and so I can let that work come home with me, and I can bring my family into that work with me. They come to support Dad.
It sounds like
Sunday,
what I face with small business, like being a small business startup.
It's very much like that.
Like you're doing like I'm doing all the editing, I'm doing all the shooting, I'm doing all the scheduling, I'm doing all the planning. Like it's like, and then you get caught up in how hard it is to let something go. Like, hey, can you plan for me, because anybody can write in the calendar, all right, you got to be here at this time, but can you write it how I want it to be written?
What I mean? In a creative job,
right.
You're like giving away a piece of yourself, because that's. So
do you find
absolutely.
it hard with some of your tasks that like you want to assign to someone else, and it's just like,
oh, definitely. Definitely, and that's a whole nother skill set, is being a leader of others, and so that requires a certain amount of attention and growing people alongside of whatever we're doing, whatever we're making. So absolutely, that's.
I think one of the things we were talking about yesterday was in the job that you have, you're here to help. You're here to help in many different ways. Help people spiritually, help people to realize their worth, and to realize their worth to God, and to grow in that fellowship. Sometimes when we're assisting others, if it's not going to work out to be as successful as we would hope, we can internalize that as personal failure. And it can get very frustrating. If you want to see, you believe in what you do, you want to see that other person be successful. And if for some reason it just doesn't work out, it's hard to divorce yourself, who you are and your identity, from that success or failure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We talked about, I think, the phrase carrying around other people's stuff is part of. Well, it's a part of trying to help anyone. I think that you could experience that in counseling or in many other different professions, teaching.
Yep. High burnout professions, by the way. I mean, like social workers are some of the highest burnout.
Yeah.
One of the most interesting things, talking about social work, I was actually walking outside to meet my son's therapist one time, and she was actually in the car crying. And it made me think, like, because I was actually irritated with my son at the time. I was like, man, she hears everyone's problems. And, who hears hers? Or, how does she decompress? Because I couldn't imagine becoming part of people's lives, even momentarily, and just hearing the problems. And maybe you do fix some of them from time to time, but then, you're on a schedule of you only have 6 months with these people. And if you don't fix it, you're leaving them, and, you hope you leave them in a better standpoint, but some kids just don't adjust in 6 months. And so I couldn't imagine, like, it made me instantly think, like, wow, man, what she does for a living is really hard, because you're dealing with kids you want to save, or you want to at least help. And, the last job or situation you left, you weren't fully decompress from, and you're bringing that out front and trying to
a person who does that job, they're going to have to be an empath, right? They're going to have to connect on an emotional level, so then they have it all built up. Crying in her car, that might have been the healthiest thing she could do.
Oh, 100%.
And you think, oh, this is tearing her apart, but she's just using what she has to be what she needs to be in that role. I want to go back to something you said a few minutes ago, Josephus. You were talking about your job and saying the difference between what you wanted to do and what you really needed to do. And I wonder if we could talk about that in the sense of what God calls us to have in our identity, in what we do as children of God, and think about how our identity in God changes the way we might look at work, how it might influence the way we look at what we do to pay the bills, but also just how we interact with the world around us. And I want to just read a quick verse from the Gospel of John, chapter 15. This is Jesus talking, and Jesus says, "Abide in me as I abide in you. Just as the branch cannot bear fruit by itself unless it abides in the vine, neither can you unless you abide in me. I am the vine, you are the branches. Those who abide in me and I in them bear much fruit, because apart from me, you can do nothing." So this is a picture of it's just sort of like a metaphor of being connected to Jesus. Jesus is the vine, we're the branches. So staying connected to Jesus means that we will bear fruit. And I wonder what you all think about that and how that relates to what we do in our work life.
Interesting. I like the way I viewed this question initially. I was thinking like I feel like I could never be like omega rich, like super, like, with a lot of money, unless like something just randomly happens where, it just like happened, like the lottery or something like that.
Well, most people won't be. So
Right.
the odds are we won't. Yeah.
But I think it comes down to what it takes to do that. And like in your career or in your path, I see it a lot in I think I've noticed it in photography a little bit more on I'm just not comfortable charging certain prices for certain things.
Mm.
And I think it's because in me, I think it's the God in me, as far as I want to make sure things are affordable for people. Like God gave me this gift to do what I do, that who am I to price my stuff out of the reach of people who just, couldn't afford it.
Yeah.
And I think that's where you find, and I don't think it's anything, I don't think it's a negative thing if you're somebody who does price yourself at, what you're worth or what, you feel like you're worth or whatever. I don't think if you're a millionaire, you're a bad person because you're able to do business on a level where a lot of people might not feel comfortable doing that type of business. Like I just can never sell photos for $10,000 a photo.
Yeah.
If like me personally, I just wouldn't feel comfortable and knowing that I'm leaving out, a group of people.
Well, and thinking about the life of Jesus, if he were considering bearing much fruit and what that means, it may not be being a millionaire, would it?
Right.
Because he actually said the opposite. I think the fruit that he's talking about is not being more successful in monetary terms, but it's bearing the fruit of being a loving human.
And that's what I'm trying to say. Is I'd rather sacrifice the
Yeah.
monetary gain to touch more people's lives than to actually, just say, okay, well, this is what this is worth, and I'm going to make sure I get every bit out of it. And I might not touch as many people with that, but this is how I'm going to choose to live it. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that, because if you're doing something and you're providing a service that no one else can provide, you should be paid for it by your choice. But if you choose to say, okay, I could make this, but instead I'd rather touch, do more for, everybody else and feel good about it internally. I think as far as like internally, I'm more rich than I'll ever need to be, because I get to see people smile daily and like really, affect.
So I think this is the secret of this lesson that Jesus is letting us in on, that, and I'm fascinated by this, that the idea that we might bear the fruit that Jesus is talking about by loving one another, by caring for the sick, by being a service to others, and loving God, and sharing God's word and wisdom, and that through all of that, we actually become richer, if you want to use those words. But the fruit that we bear becomes this fruit for us, where we find deep meaning and fulfillment in our life. Not necessarily because we're working for the extra buck, or we're working to get extra power or extra status at our job, or we're going to get our name on the trophy or whatever, but so that we leave this mark on you and me and the people around us, that becomes a fulfillment for us, and that becomes our identity.
For not to sound like, not to come off and sound like Vin Diesel from Fast and the Furious, I do value family very highly. So I like the idea of becoming extended family with other people. Like, I don't meet strangers. Like, for me, when I meet people, a lot of times I find something and it clicks, and it almost feels like we've been, friends or family for years by the time our sessions or whatever is done. So for me, I just I value that idea of hey, I'm able to help you in this situation, and you help me by, just rekindling how I feel. And it kind of builds that. It helps me stay positive in tough times. It helps me knowing that I have, all you guys to lean on, and, all these other sources of people who I've, helped or I've done stuff for that I might not have done if I priced myself out of their range.
Yeah.
It's just nice knowing that, hey, I walk into I do DoorDash on the side. I walk into a Bojangles, and, I might not be able to afford a drink that day or even a meal. And it's crazy because God will be like, hey, through working through someone else, hey, are you hungry today? We have extra biscuits, or, here, do you want a drink? And it's at the moment when I couldn't get it, or when I, wasn't able to get it or whatever. So, rich people never, it seems like they never have a worry, or they never have a care that they can afford everything. I feel like you can be, you don't have to be monetary rich to have the same thing. Just being a good person, when you walk in somewhere, people want to do things for you. So you can be rich on the opposite spectrum and not have very much monetarily, but because of who you've been, and because of the way you've carried yourself and the things you've done, it brings this richness, and people just want to do for you, or people just want to help you because they want to see you succeed. And so that's
right. And that's a bonus.
Exactly.
But the reason is the reason to be kind to one another, and to love one another is because Jesus said that is the way to find the fruit. That is the way to be with Christ and to find your
you
meaning,
have to be
your meaning
genuine
in
in
life.
it. Yeah.
And so it is something that is so mystical, and we're going to be unpacking it for the rest of our lives. But this is the place that we find our true meaning and fulfillment. And so if a job comes along and it permits us to do those things, and I think any job could, that would be the defining place for us to look for fulfillment, is to turn it into a way to love one another, like you're talking about.
Do you feel like you could answer this question being a pastor? Because, your identity would be based in God, right? With what you do for work, seeing as it's God's work, so to speak.
The question being, how does our identity in God change the way we might look at the way we find meaning and truly fulfilled by work? I think my identity in God being that I'm a child of God, and I am working for God ultimately, could also totally get mixed up in my job, where I could find myself working to, yes, I'm carrying a banner for God as building a church or whatever, and thinking that it's mine, or thinking that it belongs to me, or that it's going well because of what I do,
or if you keep chasing metrics.
Yeah,
like how many people are attending, or how much donation is coming into the church.
Right, but and forget that it's the immeasurable things that really matter to God. It's the kindness that's shown to the grieving person. It's the food that we supply to the kid that goes home hungry every weekend. It's those things that are really making a difference. So I think just like any other job, it has to have some balance where I'm considering what do I want to do, and what is God really calling me to do,
Right.
So that's it in a nutshell.
This has been a dope episode.
Absolutely. Thanks everybody for listening today. Hope you tune in. The comments are all turned on our podcast now, so please comment and leave us a note. We love to respond and let you know, and let us know that you're listening and that we can be in this together. So hope you tune in again soon. Thanks for listening.
Adios.
Bye.